Imagine the war in Europe is over, but one American general sees a new enemy on the horizon. In a captured German villa outside Frankfurt, George S. Patton tells Dwight D. Eisenhower he must strike the Soviet Union now, while American forces are strong and the Red Army is exhausted. Political alliances, public opinion, and harsh realities of the battlefield collide. Discover hidden plans to rearm German soldiers, shocking reports of Soviet brutality, Operation Unthinkable, and the moment a friendship and a career falls apart. History's greatest tank commander prophesies the Cold War and pays the price for speaking truth to power. So if you like stories like this, like and subscribe for more. May 7th, 1945. The war in Europe had ended just hours earlier. American troops danced through Frankfurt's streets. Inside a commandeered German mansion, General George S. Patton sat opposite Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower. Soldiers echoed cheers outside, but Patton's face was grave. "Sir," he began, voice low, "we're going to have to face the Russians sooner or later. Let's do it now, while our army is fresh and can crush them." Eisenhower blinked, stunned. For 3 years, he had nurtured the alliance with Stalin to defeat Hitler. The press hailed the Red Army as liberators. The public adored Uncle Joe. And here was Patton, urging immediate war against the Soviet Union. "George, you don't see the bigger picture," Eisenhower replied gently. "The conflict with Germany's over. Our people want to go home." Patton leaned forward, eyes blazing. He realized Eisenhower knew he was right, but refused to act. And that silence between them, heavy as a thundercloud, would echo through history. Patton's Third Army had driven farther into Germany than any other Allied force. His spearheads had reached Czechoslovakia, poised on the outskirts of Berlin. Everywhere he looked, he saw Soviet soldiers seizing towns, herding civilians into labor camps, and committing atrocities, mass rapes, summary executions, pillage. His intelligence officers filled their reports with horrors that shocked even the toughest veterans. In April 1945, he had confided to his wife Beatrice, "I have no particular desire to understand them, except to ascertain how much lead or iron it takes to kill them. The Russians give me the impression of something to be feared in future world affairs." Washington diplomats, consumed by idealism, refused to accept what Patton observed. They believed Stalin would honor promises of free elections. But Patton met American POWs liberated from Soviet captivity, who described treatment far worse than the Germans had inflicted. Their watches and boots stolen, rations seized, officers beaten or shot. Factories in Eastern Europe were dismantled and shipped to Russia. Communist regimes replaced every government from Poland to Bulgaria. Resistance fighters, who had risked their lives against the Nazis, were jailed or murdered. By May, Patton had crafted a full-scale plan. This was no rant. It was a military blueprint rooted in cold calculations. The Red Army had suffered some 27 million casualties. Its units in Eastern Europe were tired, overstretched, scavenging for supplies, supported by supply lines thousands of miles long. American forces, by contrast, were at peak strength, with air supremacy and secure logistics. In a briefing to Under-Secretary of War Robert Patterson, Patton insisted, "We could defeat the Russians in 6 weeks." He outlined Soviet vulnerabilities. No strategic bombing force to contest U.S. air power, feeble anti-aircraft defenses, unreliable tanks worn out by years of combat. Sherman tanks might be lighter, but they were dependable and plentiful. Most crucially, Soviet morale was brittle. Soldiers had been told they fought to liberate their own land, Many had no desire to stay in Poland or Hungary once the Nazis were beaten. If we push east, he argued, thousands will surrender or slip away, and we can arm German troops. There are hundreds of thousands of Wehrmacht men ready to fight Russians rather than rot in P camps. To Washington, this was monstrous. The United States had just spent 4 years defeating Germany. Yet Patton's logic was ruthless. German soldiers hated the Soviets even more than they hated Americans. "I'd rather have a German division at my side than a Soviet one," he wrote, and within weeks that remark had leaked, branded by the press as pro-Nazi sympathizing. Eisenhower cited public opinion. Congress demanded quick demobilization. Troops were set to occupy Germany, not invade Poland. But the real barrier was politics. President Truman, holding Roosevelt's torch, still sought cooperation with Stalin. The Yalta agreements had carved Europe into spheres of influence. Eisenhower, a master coalition builder, could not propose attacking an ally. He valued diplomatic channels, the nascent United Nations, and believed he could moderate Stalin by negotiation. "George views every problem through a battlefield lens," Eisenhower told his chief of staff. "He fails to grasp that we must learn to live with these people." Patton was far from alone in his assessment. Winston Churchill, who had viewed Soviet Russia with suspicion since 1917, had sent urgent cables in April and May 1945. He urged Truman and Eisenhower to push Allied forces as far east as possible, to take Berlin before the Red Army, to lock in influence. In his famous May 12th letter to Truman, Churchill first used the phrase "Iron Curtain." He enclosed Operation Unthinkable, his own plan to clear Soviet forces from Poland, involving British, American, and rearmed German units. British chiefs of staff deemed the plan feasible if executed immediately, but warned it would require absolute resolve. Truman, appalled at the idea of attacking an ally or rearming Germans, rejected it on the spot. When Patton learned Churchill had drafted the same strategy, he felt vindicated. "At least one man in power sees what we're up against," he told his aides. Within weeks, Patton's warnings turned him into a pariah. Journalists skewered him. His proposal to arm Germans was painted as a return to fascism. Commentators accused him of mental instability. None examined the Soviet crimes his intelligence had documented. The narrative was sealed. Patton was a brilliant warrior, trapped in peacetime politics. By August, Washington demanded action. Eisenhower, under pressure, seized on Patton's ill-chosen comment about denazification, calling blanket removal of former Nazi Party members idiotic, likening it to a Democrat-Republican election fight. Outrage erupted. On September 28, 1945, Eisenhower removed him from command of the Third Army, officially for his denazification gaffe. Everyone knew the truth. Patton's relentless warnings about the Soviets had sealed his fate. In his final months, he poured energy into documenting Soviet actions and sending urgent letters to Washington. In October and November 1945, his words grew prophetic. "Keep our boots polished, bayonets sharp, present a picture of force and strength to the Red Army. This is the only language they respect. Fail this, and we may win over Germany, but lose the war." In early December, Patton met Patterson again. He forecast permanent Soviet occupation of Eastern Europe, expansion of communism into Western Europe, and eventual showdown. "We'll fight them sooner or later," he said. "In 5 or 10 years, we'll wish we'd acted in 45 when we had the chance." Patterson listened kindly, but told him politics forbade confrontation. 3 days later, near Mannheim, Patton's staff car collided with a truck. He suffered a spinal injury that left him paralyzed. On December 21st, 1945, he died in a Heidelberg hospital. Rumors swirled. Was it sabotage? No evidence supported assassination. It was likely a tragic accident that silenced the one general bold enough to speak the unvarnished truth. Events vindicated Patton. By 1946, Soviet troops firmly controlled Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Elections were sham. Anti-communist leaders were jailed, executed, exiled. The Iron Curtain descended. The Cold War stretched 45 years, cost trillions, claimed millions in proxy conflicts. By 1949, the Soviets had the bomb. By 1950, America was thrust into Korea. The window of 1945 closed forever. Patton's view, that you strike when your enemy is weakest, proved strategically sound, though politically impossible at the time. Historians still debate whether a preemptive assault on the USSR would have succeeded, but no one disputes that Patton saw the threat before Washington would admit it. In 1947, George Kennan's long telegram echoed Patton's warnings. The Truman Doctrine embraced containment, accepting Soviet control of Eastern Europe as permanent until another day. Conservative voices hailed Patton as a prophet. Douglas MacArthur lamented his removal as a tragedy still paid for today. Ronald Reagan, in his 1980 campaign, invoked Patton's spirit of strength against the evil empire. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many pointed to Reagan's policies as vindication for Patton's 1945 stance. Patton's feud with Eisenhower highlights a timeless tension: the warrior's urge to destroy threats versus the diplomat's faith in negotiation. Eisenhower, brilliant at coalition politics, could not shatter his alliances for a risky gamble. Patton, caring little for political consequences, focused solely on battlefield realities. In the end, Patton paid with his career, and perhaps his life, for his uncompromising vision. He lay dying in a hospital bed, a man who saw clearly and spoke truth to power, even when it cost him everything. He was buried among his soldiers in Luxembourg, a fitting resting place for a general who always marched at the front. Today, the questions he posed still resonate. When should emerging dangers be met with force rather than parley? Should military leaders speak out if they believe politics blinds policymakers to real threats? Patton's answer was unambiguous: tell the truth, regardless of cost. George S. Patton was gone at 60, but his voice echoes through history as both warning and inspiration. The alliance that Eisenhower fought so hard to preserve fell apart under Soviet ambition. The war Patton foresaw came, just not the way he predicted, and the lessons he championed: seizing opportunity, trusting strength, confronting danger before it grows, remain as urgent now as they were in 1945. If you'd like more stories like these, please like and subscribe.